Hello, welcome to Gaby's Friends, and welcome to an Out of This World episode here on Viking.TV. Out of this world because today I'm here to interview one of the world's leading space scientists, science communicators, and a person whose list of awards could fill an entire show on their own. Dr. Maggie Aderin-Pocock is perhaps best known to a wide audience for presenting the BBC's Sky at Night for the past decade, as well as the children's programme Mini Stargazing. But those are merely two of a myriad of roles she fulfills. She's Managing Director of Science Innovation Limited, through which she organises activities to engage children and adults with the wonders of space. It's estimated she has directly connected with some 500,000 people globally about science and space through these activities. She's also Chancellor of the University of Leicester here in the UK, and she's the author of numerous books on space and astronomy, including this beautiful new book, Webb's Universe, The Space Telescope, Images that Reveal Our Cosmic History, which is coming out this autumn and which will be talking to us about a little later. I should also mention that in the UK's 2024 New Year's Honours List, Maggie was made a Dame. Oh, and if all of that wasn't enough, Mattel Toys have turned Maggie into one of their role model Barbie dolls. So Maggie, that is an amazing CV, and I haven't mentioned half of the things that you've done and the awards you've won. But of all the things and all the awards, is there one that stands out to you as, that you're particularly proud of?
I think it must be the damehood, because it was so unexpected. In fact, when the letter came, I kept thinking, someone's having a joke. And to be sort of a dame of the realm, never in my wildest dreams would I have thought that would be possible.
Amazing. And that was for services to space and science? Or
science and education.
Science and education, amazing.
Because the space research I do, and then also sort of the outreach, trying to encourage the next generation to come and join me as scientists.
Amazing. And what was the day like? Did you... Who awarded it to you?
Yes. Well, it was awarded by Princess Anne. And it was lovely because I've met her a few times before. And we were talking about sort of women in science and the deficit that still exists and how sort of we need to do more to sort of encourage more girls, especially into science.
Yes.
And so that was a lovely overlap. But I was there, and there was 3 generations because I was there with my mother, but also my daughter.
Oh, how lovely.
And it just was a magical day for me.
How fantastic. And new outfit, I expect.
Yes. That was the main thing. Sort of for about 3 months before, what do I wear?
Yeah. And ahead of doing the intro for today, I was sort of, do I call you Dame Dr. Maggie Aderin-Pocock or Dame... it gets complicated.
It does.
So I introduced you as doctor because that is obviously your educational background.
Yes.
But how do you like to be called now?
Well, I usually go for Dame Doctor for the first time, but then after that it's just Maggie.
Okay. It's amazing. What a very proud thing, and your mother must have been beyond herself. But then equally, at the other end, having a Barbie doll. How does it feel to be a role model Barbie?
Again, one of the things when sort of the letter came through, I thought, really? Me? And the thing is, when I was growing up, Barbies didn't really look like me.
Yes.
They looked sort of very different.
Yes.
And in fact, with my daughter, she's 14 now, but
yeah.
we used to construct Barbies. So I had to tell Mattel this, take the head off one and put it on the other to try and make models that look like us.
Yes.
And so to have a Barbie actually with my likeness was amazing. And also, for me, the big moment was the moment of revelation. Because you're there and you haven't seen it before and you think, what if I don't like it? What if it's awful? And I remember they sort of whipped the blanket off and said, Maggie, this is your Barbie. And I looked and thought, oh my goodness, it looks like me. But
yes.
me on a really good day. And I think that's how all Barbies should look.
Yeah, particularly with the movie out last year. And yes. Barbie is really cool again. But to be a role model, that's... obviously you spend a lot of your life trying to encourage children to be interested in girls, especially to be interested in science and space.
Yes.
But that's a really lovely way of connecting with very young children, isn't it?
It is, yes. And I think it's quite interesting because being a role model, I must admit, when someone first suggested I got a bit freaked out because I know what I'm really like. I am criminally untidy. I try and cram too much in the day, so I'm generally late for stuff. And I was thinking, how can I be a role model? But I think to be a role model, you don't have to be perfect. It's just having something that you're really passionate about. And for me, it's sort of speaking to people about science.
Yes. I mean, the not being perfect thing, I think there's a lot in there that we can talk about because nobody's perfect. But I'm going to make you take us right back to the beginning because your story is so inspirational. But when you were a little girl, you very early on, you were interested in science, weren't you? But you had quite a difficult education. I think it was you went to 13 schools in 14 years.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about, those early days when the very young Maggie and what you were like at school?
Yes. And so going sort of way back, it's funny, I can't remember a time when I wasn't interested in space. And I think it's because I was growing up and hearing about sort of the moon landings and sort of Neil Armstrong, one small step. Those were the words reverberating in my ears as I was growing up. And so that sort of captured my imagination. But for me, it did sort of go horribly wrong when I went to school. Because my two challenges was that I went to 13 different schools. And when I go out and speak to school kids and I tell them this, they look at me and say, how naughty were you? And I say, no, it wasn't like that. My parents split up when I was about 4.
Yes.
And so sometimes I was with my mum and sometimes I was with my dad. And so things got sort of mixed up that way. But also the other challenge I faced was I had undiagnosed dyslexia. And so especially when you first start at school, it's all about reading and writing. And these are the things I found particularly hard. So I think I was just considered a bit sort of nice but dim.
Yeah. And I mean, at one point they actually put you in a remedial class, didn't they?
They did, yes. At the back of the class with the safety scissors and the glue. Keep her occupied. And so, but the thing is, at the same time, my parents come from Nigeria and my father was saying, the power of education. And there I was at the back of the class with these crazy ideas about going into space and, literally reaching for the stars. And it just didn't really add up. And so I think I found that quite hard. And for a long time, I was sort of quite disengaged from school. I felt, school doesn't like me and I don't like school. But I was lucky that in some classes, the teachers went above and beyond and really helped me. And that made all the difference.
Yeah, so that was who, the teachers bringing up your education and helping you. And anyone at home, I mean, did your mum or your dad help you with reading and things like that?
Yes, definitely. So sort of reading at home and sort of reading books at home. Although it wasn't until I discovered science fiction, actually, that I really got into reading when I was a little older. Because science fiction stories were so amazing, it was worth the effort of reading. But I was really lucky because my father was pretty much a scientist as well. Okay. And so we used to go to the library. And I say this to my 14-year-old daughter, and she said, why don't you just use the internet? It wasn't there. But we used to go to the library and would study together. And I loved that because it made the subjects come alive. I had fantastic sisters as well. My big sister, Hal, was very into science fiction and she'd read the books and tell me about them and I'd be, oh wow, I want to find out more about that. And so I once gave a talk, science fiction saved my life because
that's amazing.
It enabled me to read and that boosted my vocabulary and helped me with the spellings and stuff.
But it's so important for children that you do find that thing to engage them and bring them on.
Yes.
And I think that some children's TV programmes also were quite influential on you.
Very much so. Not many people, they might not be familiar, but there's this television programme that was around when I was a child called The Clangers.
I know The Clangers.
Oh, you know The Clangers?
Yes, of course. Yeah, it was in my era as well.
Yeah, and they were so sweet because they were these little knitted creatures that lived out in space. And they used to go on adventures and do amazing things. And yes, they didn't speak. They spoke in whistles. Yeah. And it was odd because you knew exactly what they were saying, even though they were whistling. And so they captured my heart as a child. But it turns out that the Clangers were sort of a bit of a gateway that led on to hardcore science fiction. So that was my beginning. But then Star Trek.
Yes.
Oh, I loved Star Trek.
Yes.
Lieutenant Uhura was my role model.
Oh my God, she was amazing. Yeah. Well, all of them.
Yes.
And where they ended up and all the aliens they met.
Quite. And
so you graduated from one Clangers through to Star Trek.
Yes. And I think that almost set the expectation. I wanted to go out into space. I wanted, to go in what they call exoplanets now, because these are planets going around the distant stars we see in the night sky.
Yes.
And that's what Kirk and his team were doing. They were going to visit the exoplanets, meeting the aliens, and thought, that's what I want to do. But yes, so I had these crazy ideas, but it all sort of fell down when I went to school.
And so you battled through in a way,
Yes.
and you did okay in your exams because was that just a case of sheer determination and hard work then?
Oh, a combination of that, yes. So lots and lots of support. So going to the library with my dad, teachers who truly went above and beyond. But then also, I realised that if I had a crazy dream and I wanted to fulfil it, I needed to sort of put some graft in. And it's quite odd because I changed schools 13 times, and for many I think that would be seen as sort of a deficit. But for me, you can use it as an opportunity. Because when I got to my 13th school, I was just about to start my GCSEs, and they said, what stream should you be in? Upper stream, middle stream, lower stream. And I thought, all my life I've been in the lower stream, but this is my chance. They haven't got my previous records. And I suggested that I could be possibly in the upper stream. And so they put me in the upper stream, and I didn't watch TV for 2 years, and that's when Dallas was on. Because this was my opportunity. And so, yes, it was sort of finding... And I think that's the power of a crazy dream. When you have something that sort of drives you on, it means that, when you're reaching for the stars, you fall over and you fail sometimes, but you build up resilience and keep on going for the dream.
But how amazing that they said to you, what stream should you be in? Well, good for you that you said the top stream. And also, your parents, they didn't sort of say, well, that's a silly dream. When you sort of said, I want to be an astronaut or I want to go into space, they encouraged you to just believe in yourself.
Yes, and it's quite interesting because that's what I do when I go out and see school kids now. Yeah. I encourage them to have big, crazy dreams. And the thing is, I may never get into space, but just by having that dream, I've done things which I would have never thought possible, like the damehood. And so I think having the crazy dream really works. And so I'd encourage people, because sometimes people think, don't reach too hard because you might not get there. I don't think that matters. Enjoy the journey.
Yeah. Okay, so obviously Maggie, as a role model Barbie, so you're now obviously a role model to hundreds and thousands of children around the world. But who are your role models growing up?
Yes. So I'm lucky that I had quite a few. And so actually, first and foremost, my mum.
Yeah.
Because she is a force to be reckoned with. She had sort of quite a tumultuous childhood too. And she was able to sort of rise above that and sort of do some amazing things. So yes. And also she was sort of my cheerleader. So, go Maggie, go Maggie. And I think it's lovely to have that in life. My dad too, as well, because we studied science together, and he saw the power of education. Yeah. And when he first came to the UK, I think he felt that we would be vulnerable, and so he wanted us to get educated because that is sort of the social transition.
Can open doors.
Yeah, it does open so many doors. And so when I was about 4 years old, my father was saying, "So what Oxbridge College are you going to go to?" So, education was important for him. But then I mentioned sort of fictional characters like Lieutenant Uhura.
Yes.
Just because growing up in the 1970s, there weren't many black people on TV.
Yes.
And so see Uhura in that critical role. And I met her a few years ago.
Oh, amazing.
Blew my mind. I like to think of myself as a professional or something. But I just thought, you're Uhura. She was wonderful.
How fantastic. Yeah, she had it all because she was smart, she was sassy, she looked great in that dress.
Yes.
Didn't she? I mean, she had it all.
Yeah, she did. And so, a fantastic role model. But then I've had some fantastic teachers as well. In fact, I think all the way along my life, I meet people and we sort of engage and sort of, hopefully we sort of share experiences like we're doing here today.
Yes.
And so that really sort of, I've had lots of help and support and fantastic teachers. I think Mr. Detheridge was a wonderful physics teacher for me. David Southwood at university. I was finding it quite challenging because of the dyslexia.
Yes.
And he went on to become a director at the European Space Agency. But he sort of went above and beyond and really helped me. So
how
wonderful
fantastic.
people.
I mean, the dyslexia is really interesting, isn't it? Because, for parents, it was something probably you wouldn't want your child diagnosed with.
Yes.
And for kids, it used to, not anymore, but it used to come with a bit of a stigma.
Yes.
And yet there's all these examples, including you being a foremost one, of people with dyslexia being so creative, maybe because you have to find a way around doing things the conventional way. I mean, do you think that's true?
Actually, it's lovely to talk about dyslexia. And I think the dyslexic brain is different. And so it sort of has some challenges. So, phonetics and things like that, stringing words together, that is quite challenging. But it has some great positives as well. So dyslexics are sort of usually quite logical. They have a good sort of visualization. They're good at storytelling. There are all these positives that come out of the dyslexic brain. But unfortunately, sometimes when kids are at school, they sort of, you've got that wrong, that spelling is incorrect. And so it sort of weighs them down. But if they're allowed to thrive, then all those real positive things can come through. So dyslexia is hereditary, so my daughter has it. And when we got her tested at about 8 years old, we said, Laurie, when you sit down, we're pretty convinced you've got dyslexia. And she said, whoopee! And that is a really good approach, I think.
Yes.
And you can see it even in her English, and sometimes she spells words wrong, but the stories she tells, the creativity that comes through. Yeah. And so I think it's good to nurture those and let these kids know that dyslexia is your superpower, and you can use it in all sorts of different ways. And as you say, because, like I always say, it's when I'm doing spellings, I type something into the computer, especially when I'm writing books, type something into the computer, and the computer says, oh, damn. So maybe that way? Let's use a different word. So it builds up resilience. And that is, again, a very useful tool for life.
But you did, when you were at school and you went to see a careers advisor, I think they said to you, well, you tell us, I think they said, what do you want to be? And your answer.
Yes, I said, I want to go into sort of space, I want to be an astronaut, study the universe. And they said, well, Maggie, with your academic grounding, I don't think that's going to work. Why don't you go into nursing? That's quite scientific. And nursing is a fantastic job. Yeah. I take my hat off to all nurses, but it's not what made my heart sing.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we do discourage our kids, and we try and limit their expectations. Don't reach too high. But I say, reach for the stars.
Yeah, reach this exactly. So, nursing, fantastic thing, but it wasn't in your heart. And nursing, like everything else, you have absolutely to be driven to do it.
Yeah.
So you ignored the careers advisor who said go into nursing, and instead, you went on to university and you got your place. So you worked very hard for your
the GCSEs, and then the A levels as well. Yes,
and all sciences.
Yes, I was quite a mercenary. So for A levels, I did physics, chemistry, biology, and maths, which was a little challenging. But the thing is, I love physics because the physics is the study of everything in the universe. You can't get better than that for a curious person. And then the maths you need with the physics, and then the chemistry sort of tells us how the universe is made up. But the biology I found fascinating. How the human body works, how life began on other planets, all of that. And so as a combination, it's really powerful, but it was quite hard work.
A lot. That sounds like a lot of work. It was probably university was a breeze after that.
Oh, I wish. But again, fantastic people are supporting me along the way.
Yeah, so you went then to university, but not only you got your first degree, you then carried on, didn't you?
Yes. So got my first degree in physics, and then I stayed on also at Imperial College in London and did a PhD. And the PhD was in mechanical engineering. Because when I first went to university, I wanted to be a sort of an Einstein-like character. I could imagine myself with a pipe, yes, deep thoughts. But I realised I'm quite practical and quite hands-on. So engineering seemed like a better fit for me.
Yes.
And it turned out that I didn't realise it at the time, but for my career going into space science, the physics, which gives you the fundamental sort of understanding of most things, and then the mechanical engineering gives you the practicalities of stuff, how to put things together, how to mount something that can go into space, worked out as a really good combination.
Yes, very interesting. And then in your career, because you got very involved in developing sort of particularly things to do with, optics and telescopes. Once you've got all the grounding of the education.
Yes.
How did you take that forward then into your working life?
Yes, into application. Well, it's quite interesting because one of the weird things I did, I was very much a nerd as a child. Actually, I still am. So nerd and proud. One of the things I did was I actually made my own telescope. And so I bought a telescope, which wasn't very good. We didn't have much money because we were living in a council flat in London. And I bought a telescope and it wasn't very good because it had plastic lenses. But then I saw in a magazine a telescope making class. And I went along and you were able to sort of grind and polish your own telescope mirror.
Oh, amazing.
And it's quite funny because when I first arrived at the telescope making class, I sort of walked in the door and there was lots of people there, about 10 people. And they were all white male and about the average age was about 50 and I was about 14. But we had something in common.
Amazing.
We were making our telescopes. And so I had that sort of practical hands-on. And because I was doing that sort of quite early on, I realised that, mechanical engineering and things like that made more sense for me. And so when I started my career, I realised that, I wanted to do things and make things, but also make a difference. And so my first job was actually with the Ministry of Defence, the MOD here in the UK. And it was trying to work out, one of the projects I worked on was a missile warning system. So if a missile is launched towards an aircraft, a pilot only has a certain amount of time to do something.
Yeah.
But if you have sort of cameras on board that can actually detect the missile, you can automatically let off the pyrotechnics flares, which will spook the missile and the pilot would be safe. And so it was lovely using the science that I had learned to make a difference, save lives effectively.
How absolutely fascinating.
I loved it. And then I actively got a promotion and worked in something called landmine detection. Because this was at the time Princess Diana was talking about landmines.
Yes.
And they were horrible. There's a horrible statistic that says that the current rate of detection is going to take over 1,000 years to clear all the landmines that are out there. And so just to use the science to try and help with that problem, to try and... people use sort of, long sticks to prod the ground and try and detect landmines. Or they might use a metal detector, but then you get what we call a high false alarm rate because any metal, shrapnel, Coke cans, whatever, you pick up. And so it was trying to find a better way of doing it and finding the landmines in a more effective and efficient way.
And did you do that? I mean, was it quite effective, the system that you came up with?
Yes. The thing is, it was quite expensive because we were developing it for the MOD, but at the same time we were trying to look at other things, like a sort of a more sophisticated metal detector that would actually look at the sort of type of metal that was in the landmine rather than just picking up everything. And also something that would detect the explosive. So if you have something that's potentially a landmine, you sort of can use a technique to see if there's explosive present. And so it's developing things like that. And some of it is actually being used today.
Oh, how fantastic.
Yes.
What an amazing, I mean, that's an amazing achievement. But you still, you've gone from being this little kid that liked the clangers and all through all this education, but you still didn't sway from your goal, which was space and science.
Yes, and so that was always in the background.
Yeah.
When I got the job at the MOD, it's because there were many jobs around, and it wasn't really what I wanted to do. But what I found is, and that's what I like to tell kids, that when you do a multiplicity of jobs, you pick up skills along the way. But yes, I was still reaching for the stars.
You still reaching for the stars, and that was still your goal. So then how did you get, because you went then into developing systems for telescopes, didn't you?
And so initially it was for ground-based telescopes. And the fact that I think on my CV, the fact that I've made my own telescope really helped with this. But I got to...
Have you still got that telescope, by the way?
It's in little bits, but yes.
But you still have it?
I do, yes.
Yeah.
Well, because, part of my childhood, and it was sort of my first instrument.
Yeah. And, I mean, you can still use it, can you? Or?
Yes. I probably need recoating, because you put an aluminium coating on the surface. But yes.
Very treasured possession, I should imagine.
It is, yes.
Yeah. So then you...
Yes, I got a transfer.
Yeah.
And so I kept on applying for jobs in sort of ground-based astronomy and space, and I wasn't doing very well. But eventually a job came along, and it was at University College London, and it was to build a machine to go on one of the big telescopes. Now, my telescope, when I was a child, was sort of about 150 millimetres across, so really quite tiny.
Yeah.
These are the biggest telescopes in the world. They're 8 metres in diameter.
Oh, my goodness.
So that's the size of the telescope mirror. They're huge. And because the bigger your mirror, the more light you can gather. And so to work on one of these sort of, huge telescopes was a joy. And mainly we worked in the basement at UCL, building what we called, the instrument was called BHROS, which stands for Bench-Mounted High-Resolution Optical Spectrograph, which is a bit of a mouthful. Yeah. But what it did is the telescope, the big mirror of the telescope, would gather the light from a distant object, trillions of kilometres away. And then that light would be focused and then fed through a fibre into the instrument BHROS. And the BHROS contained sort of prisms and gratings and just various optical components which would take that light and then stretch it into its rainbow colours. And when you do that, you can analyse that light and tell so much about the object you're looking at. You can see if it's moving towards you or away from you. You can actually see what chemical composition it has, what sort of chemical reactions are happening within the heart of this object. And so for me, always reaching for the stars to actually do this enabled me to understand more what was out there.
I mean, the amount of data that you can get is extraordinary.
Yes.
And I mean, you were able to actually look at all the data that was being collected from this telescope as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we'd use BHROS, and I spent a wonderful summer actually working at the telescope. So for 3 years, we were in the basement at UCL, barely see. We felt like moles. We were
Not seeing the light of day.
Yes. And then to go from there to the largest telescope in the world. And so we packed everything up into, I think, 28 boxes. It all got shipped to Chile, where this telescope is. And then we reassembled it over 6 months. And it was a joy, because every night, one of the joys is in the Southern Hemisphere, you see more stars because you look into the heart of our galaxy. And so every night I'd be there with a glass of Chilean wine, looking up at the stars, just going, whoa.
Oh, how amazing. I mean, and also you'd sort of realised your dream effectively, hadn't you?
Yeah, well, getting closer.
Getting closer, always close. Well, then tell us about the James Webb telescope, because you were obviously also involved in that and built parts of that.
Yes.
And that, I think, launched on, is it Christmas Day 2021?
It was, yes.
Yes. So
that was a very nerve-wracking time.
A kind of slightly unusual Christmas. But can you tell us, to somebody, not a specialist like me and like our audience, what is special about the James Webb telescope?
Yeah, so the James Webb telescope, space telescope, is the largest space telescope ever built. And many people have heard of the Hubble Space Telescope, and that's been up in space for over 30 years now. And Hubble has changed our understanding of the universe. But as we gather more information, it throws up more questions. And so the questions that Hubble has posed, just through all the data we've got, we want to answer through the James Webb Space Telescope. Now, the Hubble Space Telescope detects visible light. And so that's how you can see me, because, light is bouncing from the wonderful lights there, bouncing off me and falling into your eye. We see things with visible light. And that's how Hubble mainly worked. But the James Webb Space Telescope is an infrared telescope.
Oh, OK.
Yeah. And so, for instance, when you see the pictures that are on in the book, that isn't actually how we'd see them.
The pictures are so extraordinary in this book.
They are beautiful.
Yeah.
But they've been transposed from infrared light into the visible so we can see them. And so what James Webb Space Telescope does, and infrared light is very useful. It's actually heat energy. So, for instance, when you feel the heat of the sun on your face, that is infrared light sort of bathing your face. And so this telescope has been designed to pick up that light. And it's quite good, because there's some parts of the universe where visible light can't penetrate, clouds of dust, things like that.
Yeah.
But infrared light can. So it gives us a new view of the universe, which we haven't had before, or not at this sort of resolution, at this detail. So it's a wonderful beast. But I must confess that I was one of 10,000 scientists across the world that worked on this. So
it doesn't matter. You had a role in it, Maggie.
And it makes me so proud to be part of this amazing space telescope. And it's looking out into sort of deep, dark space. One of the things is it's quite an interesting design. It's got a 6.5 metre mirror, which is quite large for a space telescope. And in fact, it had to be folded up when it was in the launch vehicle, because you can't actually sort of launch
something that big.
Yes, and also, but it sits 1.5 million kilometres away from Earth, and it looks away from the Earth and away from the sun, because if it turned around and looked at those, it would be dazzled, because just too much infrared light coming from there. So it looks into deep dark space, and so but it covers virtually everything. So it can't look at the planets of the inner solar system, but it looks at the planets further away. So it's looking at Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. And so it looks within our solar system at those planets, but then it looks beyond as well. And one of the things that I love that James Webb telescope does is it looks for exoplanets. So I was talking about Star Trek and them going on having the adventure. So exoplanets are the planets that are going round the distant stars we see in the night sky. So on any night you might see, I don't know, on a clear night you might see maybe 200 stars. Each one of those stars is a sun like our sun, and they have planets going round them. But because the star is so bright and planets don't give out any light, they're really hard to detect.
Yes.
But with the James Webb, we can actually detect these planets, and sometimes using sort of this technique I was using at the telescope, look at their atmospheres. And so we're finding Earth-like planets out there with water vapour in their atmospheres by using the James Webb.
How incredible. And in this this book we actually get to see some of these images of these. I mean, are you blown away by what it's picking up?
Yes.
By what you're able to see?
And I think all scientists, it's quite interesting because I do a television programme called The Sky at Night.
Yes.
And yeah, we went around and we were speaking to a sort of a scientist. So what would you like to see from the James Webb? And it's so exciting. And now the images have started coming through. And the thing is, sometimes we have an idea, we'll get this image and it will tell us this. And sometimes it tells us something totally different. And it gives us a new understanding of the universe. And I love that. As a space scientist, the universe is our playing field. And James Webb is giving us a sort of detailed analysis that enables us to get a better understanding of how stars form, how the planets form around them, how the universe has evolved from what we see now to what it was in the beginning.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the other things James Webb does. It looks back closer and closer to the beginning of the universe.
Incredible in the space of your life as well, how much knowledge we're gathering in terms of what's out there. I mean, I have to ask you, but do you think there's other planets where there are beings on them?
Yeah, it's funny, I get that asked a lot. And the slightly surprising answer is yes, definitely.
Really?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And it's funny, as a space scientist, because I think it's a numbers game. We know our solar system, our sun, our local star, 8 planets going around it. But our sun is part of a galaxy called the Milky Way. Now, the Milky Way galaxy contains 300 billion stars. Now, I said that each one of those stars is a sun like our sun. Some are bigger, some are smaller. And now what we're finding is most of those stars have planets going around them. And so 300 billion stars, let's say on average each one has 2. That's a lot of planets out there. But one of the things that the Hubble Space Telescope taught us is that in the whole of the universe, there are about 200 billion galaxies. So our local galaxy, 300 billion stars, but there were 200 billion galaxies out there, some bigger, some smaller. And so I think, it's funny because it's humans...
It's mind-blowing. The numbers are just mind-blowing, aren't they?
Yeah, and it's funny, some people feel a bit overwhelmed by that. But I think it just shows we're part of something amazing. We are part of this amazing cosmos. And so with all those stars, all those planets... as humans, we often think we're the centre of everything. We used to think, the Earth was the centre, the sun went round us. And then, the sun is the centre and we go round the sun. And now we know, 300 billion stars, 200 billion galaxies. So it would be very conceited to think that life just occurred here with all those planets and some of the moons, which could potentially hold life. I think there's got to be life out there. I don't know if we're going to interact with it because distances in the universe are so big.
Vast.
Yes, but I think there's definitely...
Well, not in our lifetime.
Well, who knows? They might be out there.
They might reach us. How extraordinary. Now, a bit closer to home now.
Yes.
So the audience who are watching this are the one shared passion that everybody has when they watch Viking.TV is travel. So are there particular places where you've been? Obviously, you mentioned Chile and looking up at the night sky there. Are there particular places where you visited where you think are really good for stargazing?
Actually, I've been lucky to go to some amazing places. Effectively, stargazing is one of those things that anyone can do. To me, it's the oldest science because you don't actually need any equipment. You just need a clear night and to be able to look up. And so it's a great thing to do. But yes, the Southern Hemisphere are blessed because in the Southern Hemisphere, you look towards the centre of our galaxy, the Milky Way. And so I was talking about those 300 billion stars. We are one of the stars within that system. But from the Southern Hemisphere, you look to the sort of the galactic hub. And so you see a greater concentration of stars. And it's quite interesting because most of our big telescopes, big optical telescopes, are built in the Southern Hemisphere because you have just this amazing view. And so, out in Chile, these telescopes are generally built in the Atacama Desert, the driest place on Earth. And so you get a really good view there.
And no light pollution.
Yes, and that's it.
Get away from the cities.
Yes. But even so, you can. My stargazing career started as a sort of 7-year-old growing up in a flat in London and running up to the top.
And you can still see that.
You can see the moon, and on a clear night you can see the stars. And there's something about old London town, with the twinkle of stars above. So,
yes. Yeah.
But Uluru as well. That's in Australia, another place is sort of very little light pollution and glorious views. Many of the national parks in America and other places. Because when you can get away from the street lights, that's when you really get to see the stars.
Yeah. And are there particular constellations to start with? I mean, I can just about recognise the Plough,
Yes.
because that's one of the first ones. But are there particular constellations that you think people should begin by looking for?
Oh, yeah. So the Plough is a classic. And it's sort of the Plough or the Big Dipper.
Yeah.
There's sort of 7 very distinct stars. And also because it points to the North Star. So because we're lucky in the Northern Hemisphere, that above our pole, we have a star. And people have used that for navigation for sort of, for centuries. So that's a good one. But what I like to do sometimes is something called star hopping, where you sort of have a constellation. And so, for instance, if you go from the Plough or the Big Dipper to the pole star, if you go across through the sky, then you get to a constellation called Cassiopeia, which is a sort of quite a distinct W. But one of my favourite constellations is one that can be seen in the northern and the southern hemisphere at different times of year, and that's Orion. And Orion is very distinctive with its 3 stars along the belt.
Yes.
And there's so much going on in that constellation because there's a nebula and there's one star called Betelgeuse, which is a star that's behaving badly because sometimes it's really bright, sometimes it dims and we don't know why. And so again, a very distinct constellation. In winter, we can see it in the northern hemisphere. So as the days start drawing in, Orion appears and I think, okay, winter's coming, but it's okay, Orion's here. But then the southern hemisphere also see it in winter, but they're winter. And so it's one that I like those constellations which are sort of across the globe.
Yes.
And then in the southern hemisphere, when I first went to the southern hemisphere, the thing I was determined to see is something called the Southern Cross. You can't see it from the northern hemisphere, so I'd never seen it before. But when I made my first trip to Australia, I was able to see the Southern Cross, another very distinct star system which can be picked out.
How thrilling. And when you are sort of, if you were saying somebody who's never done it before about stargazing, are there sort of little tools you could take? Is there an app that you'd recommend? Obviously, you've written books that are really good on sort of helping people to know what to look for. But is there something, if you're looking up and you don't know what it is, is there an app or something you can use?
There's some brilliant apps, and you can usually download them for free. And they are wonderful. In the old days, you had to get a planisphere and a star map. And but these days, because phones have got so much technology in them, you can sort of point them up at the night sky and say, OK, and move it across. And that's a big one. Often the question is, is it a star or a planet? A star or planet? It's a game I play with my daughter. And if you haven't got an app, you can just have a look. Planets are less likely to twinkle. Planets are much, much smaller than the stars. I mean, you can fit 1.3 million Earths into our local star, the Sun. So stars are massive.
Yeah.
But the planets are so much closer to us because they're within our solar system, so they don't twinkle as much. Oh, I just should explain, twinkling of the stars is not the stars themselves twinkling. It's actually our atmosphere. Because pockets of hot gas sort of bubble up, they make the stars twinkle. And it's lovely and romantic, but it's a real pain for astronomers. We don't want the stars to twinkle. And we actually make machines that de-twinkle the stars.
Oh, wow.
So, because then you get a much better image of the star.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to see if it's a star or a planet, planets twinkle slightly less than stars. So that's a good way to judge. But yeah, with these apps, you can sort of point it up. Oh yeah, that's Jupiter. And I think that's magic there.
Yeah.
Because light has come from the sun, travelled 1 billion miles to Jupiter, reflected off the atmosphere of Jupiter, and then it lands in our eyes. To me, that's...
I know, it is. It almost gives you shivers or goosebumps,
goosebumps,
doesn't it? Yeah. And is there anything else that... So an app is a really good idea if you're going to go stargazing. Anything else that sort of, obviously, a warm coat if it's a cold night. Anything else that you'd recommend people have as a novice stargazer?
Lovely. So first thing is you need a clear night. And then you can actually do stargazing from indoors, and so you don't have to get outside. But if you can get outside and to get to a clearing, but always play it safe, let people know where you're going and things like that. And so, yes, it's sort of as much sky as possible, and then away from street lights. And so, for instance, where I live in Guildford, we try and go to the back garden because you don't see so many street lights there. Also, at 1 o'clock in the morning, they turn off all the street lights as a power-saving measure. And so that's a great time to do some stargazing. So, yeah, away from street lights. One of the things that people don't realise is that when we're in a room like this, a bright room, our pupils will actually shrink a little because there's lots of light around. To do good stargazing, you probably want to stay in the dark for maybe 10, 15 minutes.
Okay.
Because then your pupils dilate and you can take in more light. And so that's another good. But be careful, because if you have got your pupils dilated, if someone shines a torch in your face, you feel your pupils sort of shrink again. And so, but yeah, get dark adapted. And so, yeah, get your eyes get used to the dark. And then often my daughter and I will lie on her trampoline. So just find somewhere comfortable so it can be a deck chair. Standing up is fine as well.
Yes.
Many people think, oh, I need a telescope. And you don't need anything, especially for things like meteor showers. These are lots of shooting stars, maybe at 120 in an hour, zipping across the sky. And for things like that, you want to see as much sky as possible. But for other things, if you want to get into more detail, you can get a telescope, but they can be quite complicated to set up.
Yeah.
But sometimes just a good pair of binoculars lets you see the craters of the moon in more detail. If you've got a good pair, you can actually see a bulge around Saturn, which are its rings, and maybe even some of the moons of Jupiter. So a good set of binoculars can really do the trick.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, the people watching this, one thing they've also got in common, a lot of them, is that they've been on cruise ships. And actually being out in a ship in the middle of the ocean is a great place to have a look at the stars, isn't
Definitely,
it?
yes, because you're away from all the street lights. It's a nice, calm environment. And yeah, if you get a clear night. I've been on a cruise before, and oh gosh, it's glorious. Yeah. And it's so much so that I should go to bed, but just one more look.
Yeah, so you're probably up when everybody else has gone to bed. You're up there looking at the night sky. And if anywhere in the world that you haven't been that you would like to go because of the sky, is there anywhere on your bucket list for here on Earth?
Yes.
Stargazing.
Yes.
We'll talk about space in a little while, but anywhere on.
It's funny because you mentioned I want to go into space, so I want to have a thorough peruse of Earth first.
Yes.
And I've been to many places because I do love travelling. I think travelling enlightens the soul. So I do like to go places, but I haven't been to Antarctica. And I would love to go there and see the stars, from the southern hemisphere, from the pole.
Yes.
And when it's not whipping up a storm, I think the skies would be glorious. Although you do need to time it, because it is the night, the time of the sort of the midnight sun as well.
Yes.
Because if you go at some times of year, the sun doesn't set, which is. Yeah. And if you go at other times of year, I think you might be trapped down there, but the sun never rises as well. So.
Yeah. You need
so
to
lots
time
of stargazing. Yes.
So that's your bucket list for Antarctica.
Yes.
And actually, I have to ask you, when I listened to an old episode with you on Desert Island Discs, and it was a while ago, but although your parents both came from Nigeria, you hadn't, at that stage, ever visited Nigeria. Have you been now?
I have.
You have?
I have visited.
And how was it?
It was lovely. In fact, I was speaking to some of my relatives, and so it was quite, because the things that this is the country my father spoke of and my mother spoke of, and I wasn't sure what to expect, but it was quite magical. And I want to take my daughter, because this is her heritage, and I want to get to her to get to know it. And of course, there are challenges, and sort of electricity doesn't run all the time and things like that. But yeah, this is our land, and so part of her heritage. I want her to see it.
Yeah, quite special. And what is the night sky like in Nigeria then?
So it depends on where you are again. Yeah. And so because Africa, so it's sort of towards the southern hemisphere, but it's not quite equatorial actually. And so and when I was there, it was quite cloudy, which was unfortunate. But I'm sure if you get into sort of the more rural lands on a good day, I think the stars would be phenomenal. Especially you get away from the big busy places. Yeah,
fantastic. Oh, I'm so pleased you've been.
Yes, so, and I definitely am going to go a few times, I hope.
Oh, fantastic. And then in terms of, I mean, ever since you were a little girl, you've always wanted to go into space.
Yes.
Do you think that dream is becoming closer to reality now? I mean, lots of multi-billionaires are busy trying to build things to take people into space. Do you think we're getting closer to that?
I think so. And I think it is. It's Battle of the Billionaires. Because, I mean, it's the ultimate travel plan, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so I think these people have built up a sort of huge, amassed quite a bit of wealth. I think, what legacy can I leave? What can I do to make my mark? And I think space is definitely there. And I think we've got now our first space tourists. Only just over 600 people who have ever lived have been into space. So it's still a very, very elite group. But now I think people realise that many more of us want to go out there.
Yeah.
We love the Earth and we've travelled across the Earth, but we want the next adventure. And I think that is space. And I think and in the past, it was sort of the governments, so people like NASA or the European Space Agency that sent people out into space. And it was only the very select few.
Yes.
But now we are getting our first space tourists. And so I think more and more of us are going to be getting out there. And I really hope I'm on that list.
Yes, I know. It's got to happen for you, Maggie. It's got to. You've been wanting this to happen. Your whole life really has been dedicated to it. Is there somewhere in space that is the place that you would really love to visit more than anywhere else?
Yes. Well, actually, can I have two?
Yeah, okay.
Well, the first place I'd love to go to is the moon, because I'm a lunatic, a self-certified lunatic. I love the moon. And whenever I see it in the night sky, if I had a really busy day and I step outside and I see the moon, I literally sort of, And also, I grew up, hearing about the moon landings,
yes.
and so to go to the moon would be a definite tick in the box. But in terms of a retirement plan, I think it's Mars. A one-way trip to Mars, because the moon is...
One way?
I told you I was a lunatic.
Have you seen The Martian with Matt Damon? It's quite a difficult place to come back from.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And the thing is, but the idea that sort of, that's definitely a retirement plan.
Yeah.
And the idea that I could sort of go to Mars, and also the science you could do, because as an inquisitive person, some people like to sort of potter around the garden when they retire. I want to potter around Mars. Looking for signs of life.
Yes.
We know there used to be sort of liquid water running over the surface of Mars billions of years ago, but Mars lost that water. So why did it lose the water? Was there life in that brief period? Is there life still maybe below the surface? We're finding sort of repositories. We know that Mars has sort of ice caps, and part of that is frozen water.
Yeah.
So yes, is there still life on Mars? It'd be lovely to, because that question, are we alone in the universe? We keep on asking it. We don't think we are, but maybe there's evidence on Mars.
And do you think in your lifetime that there will be manned missions to Mars?
The first boots on Mars.
Yes.
NASA came out, probably maybe 10 years ago, and they said that the first person to walk on Mars is alive today. So, and I kept saying, me. But I love to tell the kids this, because I keep saying, you could be the first Martians. And so, yes. And the thing is, in terms of getting to Mars, the technology is there. There's radiation when you're making, because it's about an 8-month journey to Mars, and you need to be careful when you're making that journey, because there's radiation. On Earth, we're protected by our atmosphere. Sort of the air around us protects us from radiation.
Yes.
When you go out into space, you don't have that protection. So we need to have a spaceship that will protect people on that journey. But yes, we have the technology, but it's the cost. And that's why the Battle of the Billionaires is quite interesting, because I don't think one government can say, yes, we will do this. If the world came together, maybe, but there's other problems we need to solve.
Yeah.
And so that's why the Battle of the Billionaires is quite interesting, because it might be pooling of money together to actually get us to Mars.
Get us there. And I mean, does it give you hope when you think of we're doing a fairly good job of with this planet, it's got challenges with climate change and so on. Do you think the hope for the future is out there in space in terms of answers for our own longevity on this planet, or in terms of potentially giving us another planet that we can all ship off and live on, or future generations can?
Yes.
What's your thoughts about the future?
I think our future is out there. But at the same time, you were talking about some of the challenges we face here on Earth. I think, and this I love to say to the kids, we need to learn lessons here first. Because it sort of feels as if we've had a wild party here on Earth, made a bit of a mess of the place. Let's go to the next one.
Yes.
So let's learn lessons here and not take the mistakes we've made here to the next planet. But looking at planets, Mars is probably the best candidate. But Mars, people think that because Mars is red, it's hot. But actually, it's about the temperatures of Antarctica. So, as you said in The Martian, life on Mars would be pretty challenging.
Yes.
But I think there'd be many pioneers that would like to rise to that challenge.
Yes, the main thing is, what would you eat? Because if you can't, as Matt Damon found, if you can't grow anything, it's quite difficult.
But it's quite interesting. I was doing a project recently with Heinz, the people who make tomato ketchup.
Yes.
And they set up a Martian biodome here on Earth. but they was trying to set up the conditions that you'd find on Mars. And in this biodome, they sort of had the sort of soil, the regolith you'd find on Mars, and they grew tomatoes.
Oh, amazing.
And made Martian tomato ketchup. And so, yes, just as Matt Damon found, you can grow things on Mars. And so I think the first pioneers that go to Mars, they'd need quite a bit of infrastructure, but then you could set up biodomes and utilise the soil with additional components to actually grow things on the surface of Mars. You'd have to, because the supply journey is too long.
Amazing, amazing. So the answer really will be out there for humankind's future then.
Yes, I think so. And also, we're talking about the solar system at the moment. Actually, would you go to Mars?
I personally wouldn't. I'm right behind you, Maggie.
Off you go. Send back a postcard.
Yeah, I'll go a few missions later once I know it's safe.
Yes, and I think that's the challenge, making it safe. But yes, and that's sort of planets of our solar system. So Mars is the best candidate. Venus is a hellhole. Mercury, no. And the other planets, we don't actually know if they have a surface. So you'd have to live in the atmosphere. But now we're finding these exoplanets again. The distances are vast. We're talking about trillions of kilometres to get to them. So from our solar system to the next door neighbour solar system, it will take 76,000 years to get there. So we're not getting there anytime soon. But in the future, when we come up with sort of better means of travel, I think, we will be out there reaching for the stars.
How extraordinary. I mean, you mentioned your daughter then. She's 14 now. Do you think she might follow in your footsteps at all? Does she?
Oh, it's funny because at school with the dyslexic traits, sort of the logic, the sort of good 3D spatial awareness is another one.
Yes.
Science is almost a natural fit. But I always say that I'm really lucky that I do what I love and I'm passionate about. And I want her to find what she loves and is passionate about. If it's space, if it's astronomy, if it's science, brilliant. But I don't want her to go into that because I'm there. I want her to find her own lucky star to reach for.
Yes.
But it's looking quite scientific at the moment. When I ask her at the moment, so what do you want to do when you grow up? She said, I want to work for you. So.
How lovely.
Actually, at 14, I feel...
Well, you can go into space together.
Oh, once when she was about 4 years old, she said, Mummy, when I grow up, we're going to go into space together. You'll do the science and I'll do the art and we'll travel the stars.
Oh, how wonderful. How absolutely wonderful. Now, I know you find if you're ever, a bit stressed and you need to feel calm, and you've had this since you were little, you go and look at the sky.
Yes.
What do you think it is about that? And I mean, civilizations, as long as we know, have had this fascination with looking up at the stars. What do you think it is about that offers you and all of these people through history this sense of calm and tranquility?
Yes, solace. I think it is part of being something amazing. And I love the fact you bring that up. Because when I was growing up, I thought that astronomy was done by white guys in togas. Because you heard about the Romans, you heard about the Greeks, it just seemed to be them. But every culture has looked up at the night sky and understood. And I think I always imagine sort of cave people, around the campfire and before we can even speak, the wonder is there. Because it's sort of something that we don't quite understand, we don't quite know. And even as our knowledge evolves and we get a better understanding of our place in the universe, there's still so much more to explore. And I don't know, I think there's just, it makes my heart sing to see it. I think that does that for many people. And I think that's something we're missing out because when we do sort of run around in our big cities and things like that, the streetlights block out that glorious view. But I think that's the joy of travel, when you get somewhere and you look up and you take that breath in and just enjoy it all. I think that's just so worth it.
Yes, how fantastic. And then that little girl, I mean, you had two parents who loved you and sisters who loved you, but you had a troubled childhood in the sense that you were moved between places and you grounded yourself through looking up at the sky. Looking back at that little girl now, what would you say to her and her big dreams?
I'd say, keep dreaming.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to say to all the kids, actually to everyone.
Yes.
I think we all need a powerful dream in our lives, something to aim for, something to sort of drive us on, something that gives us resilience. Because in my life, the number of times I've fallen over or I haven't got the right exam results or something's gone wrong. And dyslexia teaches me resilience, but also sort of having that crazy dream means that when I do fall over and it's sad and it's horrible, I think, okay, if I want to get there, got to pick myself up.
Yes.
So I think we all need crazy
and
dreams.
just keep going. Well, what a great message to end on, Maggie. Thank you so much. This sounds very cheesy, but I do feel really starstruck today. I've been dying to meet you, and
thank you so much.
it's a dream come true for me and all the people watching, and also to get your tips on how we can go and look at the night sky as well. So thank you very much.
But thank you for a wonderful conversation. I've so
that's
enjoyed
been great.
it.
Me too. Great, thank you.
Thank you.